ayes have it. The ayes have it. We come now to the adjournment. The whip to move.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to raise this important issue to my constituency and on my first adjournment debate in this place. I'd like to say a few words briefly about young people and employment opportunities in Wirral, specifically highlighting the success of the Wirral Apprentice Scheme, touching on some wider employment issues, and finally considering the numbers and the problem that we face in the supply of employment opportunities. I will begin, however, by highlighting the great success of the Wirral Apprenticeship Scheme. Wirral Council, in partnership with Connections and Job Centre Plus, have done an excellent job in increasing the number of apprenticeships and, most importantly, helping young people to apply for them. They use working neighbourhood funds to support local businesses in hiring 167 young people in everything from dairy farming to jewellery design. Nearly half of these young people were not already in employment, education or training, or they were at risk of just drifting onto the dole, something none of us want to see. There were two elements to this scheme. Firstly, the Council committed funding for that member of staff for 18 months if the business would commit to employing them for 2 years. The second and more important, I think, part of the scheme relates to recruitment support and how the Council went about finding the businesses and the young people to be employed by them. I'd like to pay tribute to Viv Stafford, Mel Campbell and the team at Wirral Council who proactively worked with young people and the employers so businesses were supported all along the way. And equally, young people were able to gain confidence prior to their work interview. Their priority was young people at risk of becoming a burden on the state, and likewise looking for businesses with little existing experience of apprenticeships or hiring young people. Overall, this scheme resulted in not only more apprenticeships and young people work ready to take up the opportunities, but employers gained the confidence to offer more work experience to young people. So not just apprenticeships per se, but they also saw employers offering work placements to young people. I really feel that this programme ought to be replicated across the country. I think we have real expertise in Wirral and that we can help make sure this generation of young people do not end up missing out on the chance of success. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State whether he supports local government playing this leading role and what the government can do to back up councils who want to take this approach. The lesson from me in Wirral is that you need a cross-partnership approach across all the responsible agencies, no matter which bit of the state they're involved in. And I'd like to know what the Secretary of State thinks about this approach. But to move on from the Wirral Apprenticeship, I think that there are wider issues in young people accessing employment. The Future Job Fund, which was making sure young people had continuity on their CVs, is now gone for the future. And those young people without work experience face a very tough labour market. My job is not to stand here and whinge on behalf of Merseyside. I will never do that. However, there are historic facts about our area that mean the employment picture there can be more fragile than elsewhere. Therefore, it's all the more important for us that Connections, working with schools, is able to assist and advise young people to get good quality work experience placements, as well as training and mentoring. Young people do need independent advice, I think. Teachers don't always have the time to get up to speed with how the labour market's moved on, so I think having that independent advice is really important. Business does have a responsibility here too. They must show commitment to the next generation, and when I became an MP, I wanted to go around and talk to lots of businesses in my community about what they felt about this. Thankfully, when I spoke to Wirral businesses, they've told me that they absolutely do want to do this. And with Invest Wirral, we have a fantastic business support team committed to helping businesses connect with all the government help available and from different sources. But this does depend on our local authority having the resources to provide this support, under great pressure, as all state funding, of course, is at the moment, given the budget cuts that they're having handed down to them. However, as a side point, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that I don't think we should let the media off the hook here. Sometimes it feels like there's very great pressure on young people to succeed in A-levels and go straight on to a university degree, whether or not that's right for them. I would like to see the media celebrate successful apprentices and young people who are in business more often. Academic success is very important, but it should not be prioritised for media coverage every year at the results time at the expense of all other forms of success from our young people. I know that the more we celebrate the diversity of our young people, the more confident they'll be, and we know how important self-esteem and confidence is in a person achieving their hopes. So I'd like to know from the Secretary of State if he can give me more information about what his department and other departments are planning to do to support young people gain work opportunities, including but not only apprenticeships. Will they support the recruitment process? And also, and I'm sure he will give me a very positive answer on this, will he commit, along with all the ministers, to talking up the achievements of our young people? Finally, we know that this is in part a numbers game. We had a really good opportunity to discuss the National Apprenticeship Scheme in Westminster Hall previously, and the fact that there just aren't enough apprenticeships out there for the people who want them was brought to light very clearly. I will, of course.
Now we are on opposite sides of the House, but our seats are next to one another in Wirral, and on this matter we stand side by side. We both talk very passionately about youth unemployment and also about apprenticeships, and I know you'll no doubt know that I'm taking on an apprentice myself. However, Labour's legacy is dire. It has brought about the highest number of young people between 18 and 24 not earning or learning, nearly 20%. So whilst I agree with the rhetoric, the actual evidence of what in reality they have done is somewhat lacking. However, I would ask the Honourable Lady whether she would join in with me to welcome the new government's allocation of 600 million for programmes to support youth unemployment and also 150 million for 50,000 apprenticeships.
Alison McGovern.
I think there was a few questions there, Mr. Speaker, but obviously the Honourable Lady and I, as members for Wirral, do stand side by side in making sure that there are enough opportunities for apprentices. I agree there. I have to say that I think I understand the point that she's making, but I would invite her to come with me to Age Concern Wirral, where they use the Future Jobs Fund to employ young people in doing very important work caring for those people with Alzheimer's. Those young people were getting continuity in their CV so that once the economy picked up, they were ready to go and work ready to look for opportunities. The first act of this government was to take that away, and it's something that is having a real impact. So I agree with her in many ways, but I'm afraid on the record of the previous government, I obviously can't agree.
So, would a friend give way?
I will.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving way, and thank you for having this debate, which I think is a really important debate for the future of our young people. But would my honourable friend agree with me that actually we've just faced an enormous global recession that has actually put young people out of work and made life very difficult for young people. And actually one of the challenges that we face at the moment is finding enough employers to actually take on apprentices, and that we badly need the government to encourage employers wherever possible to actually take on apprentices.
I do agree, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, I do agree, and in fact, if I may, when I spoke to officers from Wirral Council about the work that they've done with employers, it's sad to say that it's rare that you're ever totally inspired by a local authority officer, but my goodness, I was by our team in Wirral. They have taken employers in our area on a journey from employers where they had no history of working with young people and bringing on apprentices to being so confident that they're fully funding them themselves. So I think we need to spread that approach right across the country, and I'm hoping the Secretary of State might say more about how we could do that. So to go back to the numbers point, we know that there just isn't enough work opportunities for young people where they can train on the job. The government have said that they're going to increase the numbers of opportunities, but I'm concerned that we need to make this truly additional funding, not really rebadging of existing training schemes. Unless there are actually more opportunities for young people, and I think business has a role to play in this as much as government, we will see very great frustrations, and ultimately we'll see more young people on the dole, which is my real concern. This will not only damage at any attempt to reduce the budget deficit if we have more people on the dole, but it will damage those people for years to come. We know that labour markets demonstrate hysteresis. They have memory. If a place has suffered unemployment in the past, it's more likely to continue and lower the skills and the confidence of the people there. Merseyside has and will work very hard to combat the worst effects of the 1980s, some of which we still feel. But not continuing the increase in apprenticeships and work opportunities for young people will set us back and will feel the effects for very many years to come. People in my constituency do not want austerity economics. They want investment in our young people. So finally, to conclude, I'd be grateful if the Secretary of State could explain how the government is going to increase the numbers of work opportunities in the UK and how specifically this will affect Wirral and the Merseyside travel to work area.
Mr. Chris Grayling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I start by congratulating the Honourable Lady on securing her first adjournment debate on a subject which I know is a matter of concern across the House. And I share her concerns about the Wirral. I share her concerns about Merseyside. I was in the last Parliament the opposition shadow minister who had responsibility for building knowledge and understanding and ties between my party and the people and the businesses and the communities in Merseyside. I spend plenty of time on the Wirral supporting my honourable friend here. I know well the challenges that she and her constituents and indeed all of the people of Merseyside face. But at the end of the day, and she makes reference to the 1980s, the reality is it's not one of these circumstances where you can just say, well, what happened 30 years ago is what defines the moment. Actually, what defines the moment right now is, I'm afraid, a failed inheritance from the previous government. They had 13 years of unprecedented economic growth. They spent billions of pounds on welfare programmes. But at the end of the day, the numbers of people on out-of-work benefits across the country, across Merseyside, remained stubbornly high throughout that period. They simply failed to get people off benefits and into work. Now, why does that matter now when we're dealing with the cyclical impact of a recession? It matters because we're dealing with a much bigger block of people. It's not simply those who've lost their jobs now as a result of the recession, those who are entering the jobs market for the first time, but also a huge block of people who've been there on benefits for year after year after year. And it makes the challenge we face now to get as many of our citizens into work as possible a much bigger one than it should otherwise have been. And she's right. I mean, the Wirral has suffered, Merseyside as a whole has suffered pressures from the recession. Wirral, we saw the Swiss food company Givaudan close with 150 jobs lost. There were job losses around other parts of Merseyside. Real pressure on the community, as there have been pressures on other parts of the country. The reality is we have to create an economic situation, an economic environment where businesses can grow and develop and create jobs. And the most important part of that, and I'm very confident for Merseyside, but the most important part of that is to create an environment where businesses can grow and develop and flourish and build and create sustainable jobs for the future. And one of the things you very quickly recognise if you spend a lot of time in Liverpool and around Merseyside is actually what a wealth of enterprise and ideas and knowledge there is in and around the region, which can be, I think, harnessed very effectively to create the opportunities of the future. Coming out of the universities in Liverpool, a really dynamic spirit. I've seen some great young businesses in Liverpool and around Merseyside, and I'm very confident that if we create the right environment, an environment where we charge less for employers who take on their first few employers, where we cut the national insurance they pay, where businesses pay less in corporation tax, where we seek to reduce the burden of regulation, where there are fewer health and safety regulations that cost small business, where we try and simplify the environment for businesses to work. That's the kind of situation where people actually say, yes, I can do it, I can start a business, I can actually start to create jobs, and we can start to deal with the big problem that she rightly points out about unemployed young people. 5,500 unemployed 16 to 24-year-olds in the Wirral last year. And it is an unemployment rate that has stayed stubbornly high. And it's not simply down to the current recession. The levels of young people not in employment, education or training has remained stubbornly high throughout the last 13 years. It's higher now than it was in 1997. And it's something we really, really have to change. Now, she made reference to the Future Jobs Fund, some of the schemes we inherited. I have to say that I think many of the employment programmes we inherited from the previous government were not effective. I understand the motivation of the Future Jobs Fund, but what we found was a scheme that cost a very substantial amount of money, that generated temporary jobs in and around the public sector, that didn't create the kind of long-term opportunities for young people that gave them skills that would last a career. And we felt that, frankly, we could do better. Now, she's wrong in saying that we simply came in and scrapped the Future Jobs Fund. We didn't. There are still Future Jobs Fund jobs being created today. But what we said is we are going to phase out the scheme. It will be phased out, and what we'll be putting in its place next year will be a number of measures, including the introduction of our single work programme, about which I'll talk more in a moment. But I think particularly, my honourable friend is right. The decision by the government to deliver 50,000 extra apprenticeships, I personally believe that an apprenticeship is a much better way of giving somebody long-term skill opportunities than putting them into a temporary placement like the Future Jobs Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While you're talking about apprenticeships, that's fantastic. For those young people who have the confidence and the ability to engage, the Future Jobs Fund helps some of young people who were nowhere near ready to be apprentices, who needed that extra lift. And without that, a whole layer of young people will be put on the scrap heap. And I think that's the difference. What you're talking about is fantastic, but you've got to look at what the Future Jobs Fund did in helping young people whose situations would not allow them to take up an apprenticeship or be apprenticeship ready at this stage.
Well, let's be clear. The Honourable Lady is absolutely right to say that we are dealing with some very real issues for young people, and you certainly find that in and around Merseyside. I've spent a lot of time with groups in the voluntary sector working with young people who have some pretty difficult circumstances in their lives. And the reality is there are many people who emerge from school from those difficult backgrounds who are certainly struggling to get into the workplace, who haven't developed skills in school, who have fallen behind for a whole variety of different reasons. And we certainly have to get to grips with those. This is one reason, for example, why we as an administration are pressing ahead with the pupil premium, so that she will know that very often it's actually as early as young people of 1, 2, 3 falling behind in early years development, then getting to school behind their peers, never catching up, ending up leaving school without basic levels of literacy and numeracy. This is one reason why we're putting the pupil premium into some of our most challenged schools, so that we can try and help some of those young people catch up. She is right to say that we need to do more preparation work for young people to get into the workplace. That will be one of the key aims of the single work programme. So on the one hand, we're looking to build skills, and the apprenticeships programme is certainly designed to help achieve that. But I think, to me, the most important part of what we're trying to do is the work programme, which we will introduce next year, that will take over from existing programmes, some that have not worked, like Pathways to Work, which we've seen highlighted by the Public Accounts Committee this week, others like the Future Jobs Fund, which we judge were not delivering value for money, given the high cost and the nature of the employment provided. What I'm keen to see, and the nature of the single work programme, is to create an environment where we have specialist organisations working with people of all ages, but young people as well, who have precisely the kind of challenges to which she refers, and will be helping them move into the workplace, helping build confidence levels, helping them develop an understanding of what they need to get into work, helping them establish work placements for the first time, to build work experience for the first time, and make the jump into the workplace. Of course I will.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would he say specifically how that differs from the New Deal for young people? Because it sounds a bit like there's revisionism going, like as though there was never any good done. And in fact, the figures in Wirral are that we have half as many people unemployed now as at the time of the last recession, which is the proper comparison. So if you could say how his programme will differ from the very excellent New Deal, that would be helpful.
The big problem we had with the New Deals was that effectively they were programmes designed in Whitehall. So the standard New Deal format was 13 weeks in a classroom. with relatively little of the financial focus on outcomes, where people actually got into work at the end of it. It was very much about the government paid for placements, the placements happened, but actually if you looked at the outcomes of the different new deals, yes, it got some people into work, but the number of people who stayed in work was disappointingly low. And I think one of the big differences for the work programme is it won't simply be about getting people into work, it will also be about sustaining them in employment. And where particularly young people come out of the kind of difficult background to which the Honourable Lady refers, actually it's not simply about getting them through the first day's work, it's actually about helping them stay there, overcome some of the hurdles they reach in the workplace, some of the cultural things that they don't expect in working life, and to have mentoring sitting alongside them as they're in the workplace, I think is an extremely important part of what we seek to do. And what I'm expecting to have, and I'm expecting to see in the Wirral, is specialist providers serving the Wirral and Merseyside, whose job it will be to work with unemployed young people, and indeed people of other ages, to help them find those first opportunities for work experience, find the first opportunities to develop interview skills, to understand how to put together a CV, and also to go out and work with employers to matchmake young people with opportunities that are out there. There are actually quite a large number, as you will know, of vacancies out there, but very often somebody who's a job seeker actually doesn't really know how to go about finding the opportunities that are there. And I think the skills that are brought by a professional provider to work with people who've got the potential to get into work, to make sure we match them to the right opportunities, are absolutely fundamental. And when you set that against our plans for the skills system, we are looking at the moment, we're consulting on how the further education skills system can also be developed to respond effectively to the skills gaps that we need. And we want to give training providers greater freedom to target provision to meet local needs. Set alongside colleges and other providers with greater local autonomy to say, this is what we need in our area, greater provision of apprenticeships, and a work programme that will be both local and national. It will be a national scheme, but actually the responsibility for delivery in each area will be devolved to a provider in the local community who will be specifically mandated to work with organisations in the voluntary sector, organisations like Wirral Council. I very much want to see, Mr Speaker, local authorities participating at a local level in the work done, working with the providers, sometimes doing the work themselves. And what you end up with is local partnerships collaborating to try and matchmake individuals with employment opportunities and overcome the hurdles that very often exist between the two. And I think if we can achieve that, if we can invest in skills development, if we can deliver apprenticeships, although we face tough and straitened times financially, and although I'll be absolutely frank in saying, as an administration, we are not going to be able to do all of the things that we would like to be able to do, I think we can do it.
As you'd like to see this work in place, I would like to ask you, as a good friend of Merseyside, to come up to Wirral and see our apprenticeship scheme in action.
Well, Mr Speaker, I have to say I'm very happy to say I will do that at some point. So I'm always happy to revisit Merseyside. There are some great people. It's a great community. Liverpool is a magnificent city. And I know that both of the two honourable ladies in the chamber tonight represent constituencies which are both very important places but also very nice places to live and represent. And so I'll be delighted to come and see some of the work that's being done in the Wirral at some point. And what I would say to the honourable lady is that I share her aspiration to make sure that as many young people as possible are got into work. There will be undoubtedly times when she and her colleagues and I and my colleagues disagree about the means that we are following to try to achieve that. And it's certainly the case that we face tough and challenging times financially that are going to make it more difficult for us to do all of the things that we would like to do. But at the end of the day, we do all share that aspiration. I do not want to see large numbers of young people with their lives wasting away, stranded at home on benefits, doing nothing. We do need to make changes to the welfare state to improve the incentives to work. We do need to give people that extra push, particularly where they've been out of the workplace for a long period of time or have never worked. They do build up an issue of confidence. They're not being certain quite how to get into the workplace, to start to go about getting a job. We have to help them overcome that. We all want the same thing. I want to see as many people as possible, of all ages, but particularly young people in this country, in work, in thriving businesses, in an environment where we have created the kind of enterprise culture where businesses are growing and developing, where they're emerging from our universities, where new companies are coming into the UK to invest and create jobs. And I think if we can create that dynamic business environment, if we can provide investment in skills, and if we can deliver really effective back-to-work support for those who are not in work and are struggling to get into work, then we can achieve the goals that the Honourable Lady rightly has for her constituents, and indeed for those of constituents of Honourable Members and Right Honourable Members right across this House.
Order. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.